Salttown Productions. If you need to know about Middlewich, you need to know about the Middlewich Diary. Find us at www.middlewichddiary.com. The following programme is brought to you by Salttown Radio. Homeground with Dave Roberts.
Hello there. For this Homeground programme, we're proud to be able to bring you highlights of memories of a boatwoman. Maureen Shaw was born in 1935 and spent the greater part of her life around Britain's canals. She's fondly remembered both by Middlewich people and those who use the canal system for her time at Wardle Cottage, where the Shropshire Union Middlewich branch meets the Trent and Mersey. In 2009, when Maureen was in her 74th year, Kerry Kirwan interviewed her for the Tales of Witch and Water project. There are over 2 hours of recordings of Maureen's reminiscences in the Middlewich Heritage Archive. And as an introduction to Maureen, in this programme we bring you some highlights of memories of a boatwoman.
One night, Danny Jinx went for a pint in the cheese, and she was in, and I'm running around the pub, and I'm 2 by then, still not knowing much about it. So she said, would you take this wench off my hands, the very words of you? And Danny Jinx said, oh no, he said, Nelly would not be pleased. That was his wife, who were tied up through the bridge there, where the boat base is now. But I'm a great believer, if a man's only had 1 pint, he doesn't have a lot of bottle. But give him 2, he'll take on the world, and Joe Bloggs as well. So after having his 2nd pint, he dashed to her and said, "Giz her here." She must have gave him this little oxhole tin with my birth certificate in, and that was it. He took me back to the boat, he knocked, and this Nelly came up with beautiful black hair in big black, and he said, "Look what I brought you." She said, "How dare you?" She said, "Well, we've just lost our one and only, because they was told they couldn't have children. You bring me a throw out." So I grew up with that nickname, and they were best parents I could have had, because they were hard working. She was very strict, she was very boat clean, very clean, outspoken, law was law. So that's a bit of the beginning. The first job I had as a child was driving the horse, walking behind it. You had to walk so many bridges lengths, and then if you had sisters, you know, it'd be your turn. Learn to steer the boat. You used to learn to steer the boat with a piece of cheese and a piece of bread, one on your left and one on your right. And when your dad said bring the boat in so he could get to the fore end of the boat, above a lock or meeting boats, he would ask you where the bread was, because you had to turn that way to bring her in. Well, we'd already eaten it, which is normal, isn't it? So so they were the jobs, and then you learned to help your mother at night. One would do collars, and one would help her to wash. One would do cleaning, one would do sewing, one would learn to crochet. Education was very nil, but you would learn your sums. Money was very important, and to pay your way and work hard. The work hard thing was always pushed very hard, and being clean was pushed, because no man will have you if you can't cook and wash and crochet and clean. Big deal. I was very antisocial when it come to crocheting. I didn't want to do knitting. I didn't want to do sewing. I didn't want to do. But when it came to driving the horse and working like a man, that was more like me. I wanted the everythings. I must have got that from my father, because I believe he was Irish. Danny Jinx was a pottery, well, he was a wheelock man, and she was a Runken background. But when they left this situation and joined Thomas Clayton's, where the money was being given out, if you worked hard for Thomas Clayton's, then you got paid properly. Well, it was hard to do, because training people to work harder. Danny Jinx was already a man who wanted to fly round the canal. He'd work all night if he could pass you below a lock or above a lock. He'd have you creeping about in the dark, because he believed 6 boats behind you is better than 6 boats in front of you when you're waiting to empty at Albury, Thomas Clayton's, and you'll get paid. And then you'll go on your journey to Banbury, Oxford and Leamington, because we used to go to the gasworks. So if you work, the money was there and the work was there. With Fellers and Mortons in Clayton's, which my husband came from, it was a different cup of tea because you had to wait for the dockers in Manchester, Liverpool, Birkenhead, Western Point, and Lift. You had to wait for them to be ready for you, not you ready for them. You know, so if their stuff wasn't ready, then you could have a couple of days above and Lift waiting or below on the docks. And the same at Western Point. It was about gangs, the gangers. They were the loaders. But not everywhere loaded you. Your dad would load the boats, and whoever was about at different places. Food was another thing, you know. You didn't get food from the supermarket. It had to come from little shops when you could find them, and they were always 10 minutes down the road, but you meant 10 mile, you know, the woman you'd ask. And you would buy things like sugar and things like that, and tea and cheese, and things what would last, because they had to go in the stone cupboard outside. The houses on the locks became like a shop at the back door, you know. They always had rabbits and chicken, taters, all your greens. You had to pay, but they had them, especially on this flight. The lock would have to be out of action, and we used to pray for that, but don't tell our dad. We'd never told anybody, any mother. Mother never bothered, because they could get the washing done and get the cooking done and make some pies and things while it'd last a bit longer, you know. Do a big stew while it'd last several days, because she'd keep topping it up with something else. So she didn't mind, but Dad used to, what they call, slang this is, by the way, chafe. It means moaning and worrying. And he'd be up and down the boat like this. 2 days had passed, Nelly. Money. Where do these girls think the money comes from? They're going off again to that woman's house. And he'd be up and down. And it didn't make things better, you know. You couldn't go until the lock was fixed. Wasn't very often, but it did happen. Cold weather, you still did the same as you would have done in hot. You worked. And you didn't have any more clothes than you did in the hot. You had to get on with it. And if you had a bag of clothes, kids, which you did, and I was very lucky, as I'm very lucky today, I think, the lock house would give your mother a bag of clothes. There'd be a fight who was best dressed the next morning. But they were good clothes, you know. We knew all the lock ladies in the lock houses, because Mrs. Jinks was a stigger for manners and behaviour. And you won't get nowhere by being cheeky, which is true. Yes, because we went on the London work, and you know, when you start doing the Banbury and the Leamington and the Oxford, you're going on the London. And it was a canal that we weren't keen on. We were Shropshire people. You know, we came from the Shropshire, and it was hard work. And we got froze up at a place called Napton for 7 weeks. The horse in the field. My dad went to work on the farm, and we were froze up with a very good team, really, as we'd have starved. Harry Clayton never came out until towards the end. It was at the time when bread was on ration, and it was hard. It was hard for Mum and Dad. So Dad went on there, and the farm was called the Mersey, and they were on the lock side, and he let Dad put the horse in somewhere on the farm, and Dad worked hard in all the bad weather, and I went collecting eggs and things for the lady and feeding the animal. So she used to give me food to take back to the boat. But we were also with some other boats called the Barlows. They carried coal, and we were also with the people who made rum for Cadbury's. So we were lucky, really, because we could make drinks of chocolate, you know, and that's how we survived. See, today they don't know survival. I won't waste, you know, that's why I make meals and I cook. Because I became a cook after I left the boats and got married, and at Bolton and Paul's they made aircraft, Spitfires. I took a bit of stick there, you know, because the lads, they had 500 apprentices, and they used to shout, "Your boat's going by, Maureen," and I used to say, "Yes, yours will one day." But yeah, you had to fight for your place, because you wasn't accepted just like that, and anybody who tells you wasn't a liar. Even at school, the kids would push up and say, "I'm not sitting again you." And I used to say, "Please yourself." I don't know what you'd think of this word, but I wouldn't have changed my life for a gold clock, because the interest of people, since I've been grown up and married, and now I'm 74, soon, 28th of March, I've lived a paradise life these last 40 years.
I think it's, if you work really hard, I think you understand the value of things a lot better, because you've had to work for it.
And when you've started with nothing, I mean, I'm not afraid to sit here in my house with all the surroundings, and British waterways are very good to me. If you've had one vest, one pair of pants, shoes with the bottom out with paper in, a big hole in them, and then you suddenly have 3 wardrobes, and God only knows how many pair of shoes, you begin to ask yourself what it's all about once again. You know, when you should have been able to appreciate what you'd got, you wasn't old enough to do, and then when you're old enough, your life turns around once again. You want it in every direction. I could spend my life at this very moment talking to people. A gentleman came up to me the other day. I was doing gentlemen's only, and he said, "You do know we're short of lady speakers, but by God," he said, "I didn't want to come tonight, and I always go to sleep when it's a lady speaker, but by God," he said, "I didn't want to go and miss a thing." I said, "Thank you." He said, "I find it very hard to take on board that you've had no education." I said, "Well, I can prove it." I said, "And Mrs. Jinks was a very good scholar, so we were very lucky. She did her utmost every night to teach one of us and knock it home, you know, because we used to bell against it. Could have gone to the pictures, could have gone to Mary's house, you know, but when you're young, you don't know what you're turning down, do you? You know, you only think you know."
So, to do with cargoes, you've sort of like said what canals you actually use.
Yes, well...
what's all the different types of cargoes that you can end up
Well, when we were working for... When Dad was working on there before he had children, on the Trent and Mersey, he was working from the potteries, you know, with china clay and Wedgwoods. So everything you needed in shops and everything you needed on the boats, everything you needed in your houses, we carried, you see. And then he went to work for several firms in Cheshire to get more money. And he was working for Simpson and Davison's, and they carried coal and everything, and they worked to Runcorn, you see. They were Runcorn boaters, and they loaded on rivers and everything like Clayton's did. And then when he changed and went to Clayton's, Thomas Clayton's, he also worked for Fellas and Mortons and Clayton's. They carried everything, you name it, we carried it. And I've got photographs where I took where Dad had Ovaltine's, you know, they carried Ovaltine, and they carried Cadbury's. You see, I've got Cadbury's. And Thomas Clayton's, he carried crude oil and tar only, because that's what they were, crude oil boats and tar boats. And we loaded at Ellesmere Port, and it was called Stanlow. It's called Shell now. And when you worked for them, you was carrying oil, and you would have to hurry up, because if you didn't get there on a Friday morning, then you would spend all the weekend, and that was a lot of money to lose. There would be many boats tied abreast in twos. That's what it means when they say tied abreast. And they would be losing money because they'd missed the 12 o'clock. You've got to be going down that river before then, you see, clearing the locks at Ellesmere Port and getting onto the ship canal, getting down to Stanlow and getting back, because there came a tug with you see. You put your boats abreast like that, and then the tug pulled you down the river and up the river, because there were big ships on the river and you needed that support. And they'd drop you off at the locks coming back into Ellesmere Port Basin. Then you was on your own again. When you had horses, you needed the tug more than anything, you know, to pull you about. So that's how that was done.
Yeah. So different firms operated in different goods?
Yes, different cargoes, yes. Like Cadbury's, you know, it was in the raw, it wasn't the chocolate then, it was in big clusters like your Aero is. When you bite into an Aero, then it's got holes, hasn't it? Well, that's how that was. But it was usable, but it hadn't been broken down to make chocolate. So they used to use it as it was to make cakes, and you could eat it. So they used to lose a bit at Lockhouses, you know, because it was worth a big bag of vegetables and a rabbit.
But you were weighed anyway, weren't you?
You were gauged. It was called gauging. Oh yes, and you was asked where it had gone, and, you know, if you got away with canal water, because when you drove, there wasn't only 2 paddles in them days. These locks had centre paddles, and around the Midlands they were known for flushing your boat out because they were good. They were to help to fill the lock quicker. So when you drove the centre paddle, the water went in the deck and in the cabin and everywhere. So that was why they had centre paddles, and that would compensate for what bit of stuff you'd use. Like sugar was the worst, the best one you could get away with, because if it got wet, you know what happens to it. It goes,
yeah, you've got no cargo,
no good at all, and you can't stop it once it gets wet. So you could get away with that.
So what happened when things did get spoilt like that, and you got to the other end? I mean, all you
had to clear them.
Paid for it.
You didn't get paid for it, and you had to clear them. You know, well, they had a mishap, like, you know, and get it emptied and get on your way. There was no niceness about it, and you know, it was one of them things.
So with your particular boat, with the Thomas Morton Clayton, I take it that they looked after the boat and they did all the necessary repairs, and did they also provide you with a horse as well? Yeah,
best friend you could have worked for, really. They did the horse. They brought, if your horse went lame and it was ready for the knackers yard, oh, I shouldn't say that, they would give you a new one. They would bring it out to you. We had one brought out at London Bridge. You wouldn't get away with this today, but it really did happen, and I've got a sister left to prove it. Me and our Mary went to watch. At London Bridge, they brought the new one out of the horse box and shot the other one there and then, and that was taken away by a vet. Now, you wouldn't get away with that today. And how they did it, how they didn't do it with a gun like we'd think. It was like a round thing, and they put it here at his head. Hit it with like a big mallet, and he just stretched out. And that was goodbye to Rosie. They had names, you know.
So how important was your horse? Did you get attached to the horse?
Your horse was that important. You didn't get over attached to it. You'd stroke it and say, well done, you know, when you'd done a big trip. But don't forget, without your horse, before they went motorised, there was no living. That was your living. If Dad said to Mother, can I have a shilling to sup the horse up, that shilling would buy him some A for the horse and a pint. That's what he's supping up. So he would say to Mother, have you got a shilling to sup the horse up? Because wherever you go, you had to pay for the stable. And she said, I need a shilling for feed these kids. She said, never mind the kids or yourself or me. The horse is your living.
So at least the horse's working life was a good one.
My dad looked after his horses. He washed them down. Have you ever heard of linseed oil? He used to wash them down and made the coat shine. He used to clean the feet out with a little knife and put his own shoe on. He knew how to trim up, get the fire hot and put your shoe on. See, you were never fed up like today. There was always something going on. Like you'd hear terrible screaming on another boat. He wasn't hitting her. She was having a baby. So I used to run, hoping I could get a glimpse. Never got one. Never got a glimpse of Mrs. Jinks and Mr. Jinks being naked. When they were having their babies, had already got me and I'm growing anyway. I hurried up because Clayton's had to put an air vent in the back end of the boat, in all boats, like a diamond. Then it had a shutter coming across for the winter and for the night, you know, so rats and things wouldn't get in. I got down on my stomach and all I could hear was, never again! Oh! So I went and told all my mates and all my friends and my sisters, don't have a baby, it's wicked. Wicked! I told everybody. Well, I thought it was, you know, the noise was tremendous. But it's just according to who you are as well, they said, you know. Some are quick. Mrs. Jinks being a little woman who was 5 foot nothing. She had trouble having babies and so did I. Some people do. So that we made more noise and then what was being killed? You could have a doctor as long as you could pay. If you didn't have the money, you couldn't have a doctor. So the lady off another boat would be very skilled in bringing babies in the world. Holding them up and saying, Nellie, you've got a lovely girl, not another one. You know, because the girls came first. There was Oliver lost and David are lost. There was Mary, Violet, Nellie, me, Johnny, David. So quite a family. We had now more space than anybody else. Mum used to put 2 at the foot of the bed, and she'd have one behind the pillars, and she'd have one behind her head, and then she'd have the youngest of all on the side bed with his gear connected so as he wouldn't fall off. His rainings, you call them, you know. If Dad didn't feel like going to bed, he'd stay up all night on the coal box. He'd have a cup of tea before he went to bed, and his fag, and that'd be it. He wouldn't take his clothes off that night because he wanted to get away in the middle of the night. So, and we slept in the fore cabin because that's what fore cabins was for. It was for the horses' gear and corn and for us girls. So you could sleep a few in there, and the slide would go off any time in the morning early. Get 'em on, let's go. We'd do a bit of moaning and we'd get told there was nothing up with last night, was there? Or the Beano and Dandy. His cards was waiting to go in the army. The 2-year thing was on, you see. And we did our utmost to stop him, me and Mother at Birmingham. You know, we went in front of this colonel, somebody, and he told me straight to my face, that's something we lack today again for these young uns. He said, right, how can I help you? I said, well, I've only been married a week and I've changed my firm. My dad and mum works for Thomas Clayton's and this is Fellas and Morton's. It's different again. You've got a cloth up, you've got to walk planks. I don't think I can carry it out. He said, stand up. You've got 2 choices, Mum. Get on with the job you've been allocated for. He said, I'll go back to your mother. So I thought, well, I don't want to do that, do I? So we got on with it, you know, and I had sisters work with me and another girl come to work with me. And we got on with it. And Jack did his time in the forces and learnt to read a bit. So that was good, really, because it helped him. It might have hindered me, but I learnt it. And the men wasn't nice to you in them days in docks, because it was a man's world. And they used to shout, you know, you took on the job, let's see you move it. And if you imagine from that other room, from the top of the ceiling, a bag of wheat coming to you, is it any wonder we look like this? Because we had to become very fit and very strong. And I've threatened them many a time that it would go in the river, and they would threaten me with the inspector, because there was always one about looking like a bus driver. You know, all the gear on. Because they'd stop your money, you see, so you knew you wouldn't get away with it, so you just threatened them. I had bright red hair, and the limit is the limit. I think you can only push somebody so far. And I let one go, and my language was not good. And he said, that bloody wench, he said, it's that bloody hair, he said, as defiant. And I was, and I still am. If I'm right, I'm right. Everybody was very fast, and a lot of people did things on you that you wouldn't have done really, but caused big rows and fights. Many of fights happened on the lock. Men only, not women. But they would see you coming and you'd be really near the lock and they would draw the lock off. And it was called being a dirty worker. But my dad never fought. Danny Jinks never got riled. And I think that can hurt you more than anything. He taught us that. Like the man would say to him, to try and to provoke him, you could have been a bit quicker, Danny. He said, yeah, the Lord was in that position when he made the world. No more than that. Mother would be really giving it the rag, you know, like today. Oh, she could swear. She could swear for Britain. And she used to say, get one back, we'll get one back, George. Oh, don't know where he got away with it, you know. And I used to think, oh, be quiet, Mother. Yeah, they did. They had fights and they fought over the best horse. Who got it? Best boat. Smartest woman. They didn't like big women. I know his stomach in. Like my mum's sister said to her at Wolverhampton Top Lock, because she came down because they lived in Stafford Street. Because my grandma, Mrs. Jinks's mum, she had a post office at Wolverhampton and house was well attached. The house was upstairs and the post office was down, you see, in Stafford Street. We used to take the washing to her because she did our washing. Because when she got off the boats, that's what she turned to, because my mum's dad was never a boatie. Jack Evans was never a boatie. He was a Wolverhampton man, not a boat person. He was a railway man. While we came here, we were brought by British Waterway for their jobs. Jack was sent for to work on the river, on the Northwich, and the tug was called Northwich, what he drove. And then he drove a new one for him, all computer, called the RP. Hard working, knowed his job, and very quick to learn. Modernisation. Education was my important. The thing I shared with Tony Blair, and I never knock him, is education. I used to struggle, I'll tell you, and I struggled for about 3 months before the woman found out about Paul, that I was no scholar. And she said, Maureen, could you come to my office on the afternoon? And I thought, oh dear, I'm going to be sacked. I went and she said, take a seat. She said, why didn't you come to me? She said, you pulled it off really well. She said, explain why you can't. So I explained. She said, but you've been all through the system. How did you cope? I said, hard work. I had to think of everything I had to do the next day. Asked occasionally about gravy. Did he want 3 lots or 2 lots? I said, the biggest problem I had was getting my wages, because you had to sign in front of them. Well, I could. Well, I could do capital or I could do joining. Well, some days I'd forget. Some Thursdays when we got paid, I'd think, oh, I'll just cut it out today. SHAWM, sure, you know. Then another time I'd be in the mood for doing double, and they'd say, what's this? And I'd say, oh, just one of my fads, you know. And I wouldn't explain about it because of the background, you see. I was frightened to get in the sack. But when she found out, she pulled all the stops out. I couldn't have a better lady. Her name was Miss Ashton. She was a miss, and she was in her 50s, and she took me under her wing, and she was really good. And the women I worked with the golden women. I was a little girl, so it really didn't do a lot to me, but it blew the boats up at Birmingham. He wasn't after blowing the canal boats up. He wanted to blow the railway station overhead at Saltley there, but he couldn't. He missed it, and he blew these boats up. A chap called Jimmy's mum and dad's boats, because they used to make you go in the shelters with all you lot. Ellesmere Port was one of the worstest places. You were dragged to the shelter if you didn't want to go. But it was a good thing, really, because good job, you know. Jimmy Stubbs, his name was, and Ike, 2 brothers, and the mum and dad. But I don't think his mum and dad went, but they escaped it. But they were lucky, you know, because Jerry was really bombing the cities and Birmingham was no escape. I've seen young Germans on the Bunbury flight up here, near Beeston, in a field with their hands like this. We've seen them hanging off trees when you come through Market Drayton Wood. They've been captured, you know, but they're waiting for us to pass. And they're tied up like hanging on a tree because their chutes have got stuck and they're talking in their language. And of course we're mocking them. I mean, we're naughty, you know, really. Yeah, it was bad, but the boats could get away with it because what they used to do was cover up the brasses, cover up the horses' brasses and feet. And we weren't allowed to strike matches or light fires, nothing like that. No candles, you were warned. Or would you get a bloody good hiding if you disobeyed and lit a match or a candle? Because it could cost you your life, you see. And Ellesmere Port was another one when we used to be waiting to go down. All the sand thing was there, and if they landed in that, they'd sink quick. It was like quicksand at Ellesmere Port, and then you'd got the river. Well, they were trying to bomb the ironworks where we were going, Stanlow. That was their method, really, but they come unstuck. They used to come down in this quick thing. Of course, it buried them. And the air raid sirens was horrible. They used to go forever and ever. Ooh. They fall out very quickly if they don't know the rules. Like we had a lady here last year, you know, because she'd come to the lock and their boat wasn't showing at all. Well, you have to be below the lock at the rings here, 70 foot there for you to wait. This other boat was already at the lock and the lock was full and the gate was open, so it was his lock. Saving water we are, but that's why we've got a new clock. She wouldn't agree. She played hell with these couple. She wiped the floor with them. And this woman brought me into it then. She come and knocked and she said, well, we've got a problem. I said, I've been watching you through the window. I said, she's got a problem, not you. So I said, have you got a problem? She said, I haven't. I said, well, I disagree. Born and bred boatie. The boat coming down was already through the bridge. The top gate was open. The lock was full. It's their lock. You are nowhere. Where are you? She said, round the corner. I said, we neither walk on water in Cheshire or read through bricks. So how'd you work that one out?
You'll be listening to highlights from Memories of a Boatwoman featuring the late Maureen Shaw of Wardle Cottage in Middlewich. The original recordings were made by Kerry Kirwan, and this programme has been brought to you by Salttown Productions, courtesy of Middlewich Heritage and Middlewich Town Council. We hope to bring you more from Maureen in future editions of Homeground. In the meantime, this is Dave Roberts saying thank you very much indeed for listening. Join us next time for more Homeground.
Salt Town Radio. If you need to know about Middlewich, you need to know about the Middlewich Diary. Find us at www.middlewичdiary.com. Salt Town Productions.